Welcome to the AI Brief from the YPO Technology Network. I'm Stephen Forte. Here is what shifted. ClickUp, the workflow software company, laid off 22% of its staff last Thursday. The CEO went on X and said, in writing, that this was not a cost-cutting move. It was a radical embrace of AI. The company is replacing those people with 3,000 internal AI agents. And the workers who stay are getting a new compensation tier, $1 million salary bands for anyone who, in the CEO's words, creates outsized impact using AI. Same week, Microsoft's head of AI, Mustafa Suleyman, told the Financial Times that within 12 to 18 months, most tasks that involve sitting at a computer, accounting, legal, marketing, project management, will be fully automated. And Anthropic is closing a $30 billion funding round at a $900 billion valuation, higher than OpenAI, the biggest private AI valuation in history. 3 stories, 1 thesis. The white-collar AI thesis stopped being a thesis this week. It became a forecast. Then it became a company. Then it became a market price. That is what we are walking through today. Start with ClickUp. Quick gloss for anyone who hasn't followed the company. ClickUp is a 9-year-old workflow and project management platform last valued at $4 billion in 2021. It competes with Asana, Monday Notion, and Atlassian for the seat on every knowledge worker's screen. Last Thursday, it cut 22% of its workforce. The CEO, Zeb Evans, posted the math on X. The company is rolling out 3,000 internal AI agents to take over the work the cut staff was doing. Then he said the part most CEOs will not say out loud. Quote, most savings from this change will flow directly back into the people who stay. We'll be introducing $1 million salary bands. If you create outsized impact using AI, you'll be paid outside of traditional bands. End quote. Read that carefully. 2 things are happening at once. 1, a public bet that a SaaS company can run with 22% fewer people if the remaining staff are AI leveraged. 2, a public commitment to pay the survivors a multiple of what their old job paid, decoupled from title or tenure. That second part is the one that should land for every CEO in this audience. For 2 years, the workforce conversation around AI has been about how to cut. ClickUp just made it a conversation about how to pay. The framing has flipped from AI lets us reduce headcount to AI lets us pay our top operators like founders. This is the first SaaS company to bind layoffs, agent count, and uncapped compensation into a single workforce strategy. Your CHRO is going to be asked about a ClickUp plan inside 90 days. Have an answer ready. Now zoom out. Same week, last week, Mustafa Suleyman gave an interview to the Financial Times. Quick gloss, Suleyman is the CEO of Microsoft AI. He co-founded DeepMind. He is one of 3 or 4 people on the planet whose timeline calls actually move enterprise planning. He said this, quote, most tasks that involve sitting at a computer will be fully automated by an AI within the next 12 to 18 months, end quote. The tasks he named, accounting, legal, marketing, project management. Now, when a futurist says that, you can discount it. When the CEO of Microsoft AI says it, on the record, to the FT, you cannot. That is the person whose company sells Copilot to your finance team, whose models run inside your audit firm, whose timeline is functionally the timeline that Microsoft's enterprise sales force is selling against this fiscal year. 12 to 18 months, that is the back half of 2027. Not 2030, not by the end of the decade, 2027. If you are building a 2027 plan that assumes your accounting, legal, marketing, and PM functions will look roughly the way they look today, you're building it against a forecast that Microsoft's own AI chief has publicly disowned. ClickUp just gave that forecast a real-world data point. The 18-month clock started ticking somewhere, and ClickUp may have just told us where. Then the third leg. Anthropic is closing a $30 billion funding round this week. Pre-money valuation north of $900 billion. That makes Anthropic the most valuable private AI company on Earth, passing OpenAI's $852 billion mark from March. The escalation trajectory is worth saying out loud. $61 billion in March 2025, $183 billion in September 2025, $380 billion in February 2026, $900 billion now. No private technology company has ever repriced this fast in American history, not one. Underneath that headline, two more numbers from the SpaceX S1 filing that dropped last week. Anthropic has agreed to pay SpaceX $1.25 billion per month for compute capacity through May 2029. That is $15 billion a year to a single vendor for one input. Anthropic's annual revenue run rate, while we are at it, just crossed $30 billion, up from $9 billion at the end of 2025, triple in 5 months. Here is why this connects to ClickUp. The capital markets do not pay $900 billion for a research lab. They pay $900 billion for a company that will own a meaningful share of the white-collar labor that ClickUp and Suleyman are talking about. The investors closing this round are underwriting the same thesis, just with money instead of layoffs. ClickUp made the bet. Suleyman set the timeline. Anthropic just got the financing. That is one story, not three. Here is my read. 3 weeks ago on this show, the through line was that the agentic enterprise had become real because SAP and KPMG made it real. That was the vendor story. Who is going to sell this to you? This week is the operator story. Track what happens once you buy it. ClickUp is the answer to that question, and it is the most uncomfortable answer most boards are going to hear this quarter. Because the answer is, you do not buy AI agents and add them on top of your existing org chart. You buy AI agents and you restructure the org chart underneath them. You cut where the agents work and you pay outside of bands where the humans add the leverage. The middle of the curve disappears. That is the ClickUp test. And every CEO listening to this is going to be asked in some form by some director in some meeting in the next 90 days, what is your version of it? The honest answer for most of you is, we do not have one yet. That is fine. You are not behind. You are on time. But the time to start building the model is now, not after your audit committee reads the same TechCrunch article you just heard me cite. If I were in your seat this week, I would do 3 things. First, get your CFO and your CHRO in a room with one question on the agenda. If we ran ClickUp's playbook in our company, what does the org chart look like in 12 months? Not as a plan. As a stress test, the point is not to decide. The point is to see what your team can describe in plain English and what they cannot. The gap is the work. Second, pressure test the Suleyman timeline against your own functions. Pick 3, accounting, legal, marketing, borrow ClickUp's list. For each one, write down 2 numbers. 1, what % of the work today is honestly a workflow an AI agent can already do. 2, and what would have to be true for that % to be 80 in 18 months. If the gap between those 2 numbers is small, that function is on the clock. If the gap is large, you have time. Either way, you now know. Third, start thinking about your top decile compensation philosophy before your top decile asks. ClickUp's $1 million bands are going to leak into the labor market. The best AI leveraged operators inside your company already know they could be working at ClickUp or Anthropic or a Brett Adcock startup. The question is whether your compensation structure has answered that yet. In most companies, it has not. One more thing before we close. The Anthropic valuation matters for a reason most coverage missed. Anthropic is not a consumer company. It is not a search company. It is not a media company. It is a labor substitution company. That is the bet the investors are making at $900 billion. That is what ClickUp is implementing in real time. That is what Suleyman is telling you on the record is the timeline. When labor markets, capital markets, and enterprise software vendors all agree on something, the move from optional to mandatory is fast. The white-collar transition is not coming. It started last Thursday. That is the YPO Tech Network AI brief for Tuesday, May 26th. I am Stephen Forte. If this was useful, send it to a fellow member. I will be back tomorrow with more. Until then, stay sharp.